Alright everybody, welcome back to Mohawk Motors. My name is Jason. I've just finished tidying up the garage because, man, it was a wreck. I'm actually able to work in here again, which we needed to do because we have to get this transfer case ready to be bolted onto the 4L80 transmission in Matt's K10. Now, I think I mentioned it in some of the other videos. This is an NP208 transfer case. And GM used these in all kinds of stuff. They used them in K10s, K20s, K30s even I've seen them in. I've seen them in the military CUCV trucks, the D30 designation. And they get a lot of hate, but I really don't think it's necessary because they're really a solid, reliable transfer case. Now, are they as strong as some of the newer stuff like an NP261 or 273? No, they are not as strong as those. But for our purposes, with just a stock 6-liter, even if we were going to put a cam and do some other work on this engine, this transfer case is more than sufficient to handle all that power. It's got a much better reduction ratio than the NP205 or NP203 that was also used in Squarebody trucks. And it's much more available than the NP241 with a passenger side front output that GM used. I think they used that only in 90 and 91 in the Suburbans and Blazers. So we're going to make this one work. Because they used it in so many different things, we can do it all with factory parts. I showed you in the transmission video the transmission to transfer case adapter we're using to actually get the transfer case bolted up to the transmission. Now the difference we have to fix here is this is a 27 spline input that matched up with a 27 spline output for the 700R4 transmission. Now that we have the 4L80E with a 32 spline output, we need this 32 spline input in the transfer case. So it's going to be remove and replace, take it apart, put it back together. Not a super in-depth job. This transfer case functioned and worked flawlessly. So unless I find something inside of it that that wasn't indicated or given away by something that, you know, it didn't have any problems. So unless I find a surprise inside of it, I'm not doing a full rebuild. I'm not going to replace a bunch of bearings that are just fine. I'm going to take it apart, swap the inputs, reseal it, and put it all back together. So I've never taken one of these apart before. It seems they're pretty simply constructed. So I'm going to get you set up on the tripod and then we'll figure it out together. All right, so what messing around with transfer cases I have done is the input almost always inserts from the rear of the case. So we're going to start at the back here. I'm going to take this output housing off. And it appears to be just secured with a bunch of 15mm bolts. Same with the back half of the chain case here. It's got a bunch of 15mm bolts. So I'm going to zip all those off. We'll see if it comes apart. Retainer. There it is. Okay. So we got the holder. I got the little speedometer gear here. That's all fine. Snap ring in there? I don't see one. or if it's just tight on the... That's all it was. It was just sitting pretty tightly on the bearing in there. So, no big deal. And that's sealed with RTV. So, we'll be able to get that all back together. Looks like oil pump gear. Double check. Yep, that's all of those bolts. Now, typically, these cases have little spots cast into them. Then you can put something in to get them separated without damaging your sealing surface. And this case does too. One over here, one over here. The bolts with the washers on the heads are the ones at the little tri spot. There we go. There's our magnet on the bottom. We've got a spring over our shift rod. We want to make sure we get that all put back together the way it came apart. Then, sit all my bolts over there. Okay, so, just so you can see. Oh, not my bearing. There we go. Here comes our chain drive. Oh no, a needle bearing. Oh, well, I guess we get to restack a needle bearing. Oh, that's a bummer. Those aren't fun. Oh man, all my shifter dogs too. Oh, lame sauce. Okay, well, nothing we can't handle, just more stuff to take apart. There's our planetary and our low range shifter. And there's our input shaft. Oh, more needle bearings. Let me find a magnet. Alright, let's do this. Let's get our input shaft. That's what we're after. And there's our input shaft. Put that there. And now, I can tip this up. Stay where you belong. There's the rest of my needle bearings. Now, clean it and put it all back together. So, I'm not going to bore you guys with the cleaning. I'll get it all washed off, cleaned up, and then I'll bring you back when we start putting everything back together. Alright, I got the case all cleaned up, scraped the gasket surface. I'm going to start getting stuff put together. I want to try to do this quickly while it's all still fresh in my head. So, I got my new input here. And I'm just going to take, it comes with a new bearing on the inside. This is the roller bearing that goes on the inside. And I've got a roller bearing here on the outside. There we go. Quick little loop-de comparison. Those are identical. Excellent. Get my little race here. There we go. And we're going to get this right back in where it belongs. Ta-da! Nice. And we've got my planetary gear set here that we need to get okay, so getting everything lined back up into this thing takes a little bit of patience, right? Getting the planetary gear set to slip over the input shaft, as well as get the shifter arm in place where it needs to be. It took me a little bit. Now you can see I'm trying to get the main shaft slid back into place, and this has to both slide into the input shaft as well as into spline into the planetary gear set. So I took it back apart, did a check to make sure that it was fit into both pieces like it's supposed to individually, and then here I go again, trying to get it wrestled, jiggled, shook back down in so everything is where it's supposed to be. Now I got to get this the shift collar reinstalled, and when I took it apart, you saw the detent dogs pop out of there, so I had to figure out how to hold those in place and get the shift collar slid back over without having everything go flying everywhere. And it took me a few minutes, but I got that wrestled back together also. There it goes. And then just checking to make sure everything's still lined up. Trying to get the shifter moved a little bit just to make it easier to get everything back together. And then you can see here now I've got the main shaft with the shifter back on it. So next thing, I gotta get that roller bearing cleaned up. Some of them fell on the workbench, so I got those cleaned off, and then I'm gonna get them stacked back on around the main shaft. If you've never done something like this, some assembly glue like I'm using, which it's intended for transmission assembly, but it'll work just fine for this also, or even just some wheel bearing grease works great to help hold those rollers in place while you get the outside race slid back over. You can see here I'm getting the retainer clips slid back over the two main gears that drive the chain. And now I'm getting my little drive gear, speedometer, drive gear and stuff slid back on the shaft. And we're ready to seal it back up. So these cases are sealed from the factory with RTV, with silicone. So that's the easiest and best way to put them back together. And guys, a paper thin layer, like you do not need much. I spread this all the way around that surface super thin with my finger, and it still squishes out when you tighten it together. These surfaces are machined exactly perfectly flat for this reason, because it's intended to be sealed this way. So it does not take much silicone to get it sealed back up. And I get all the bolts run back down, and then just give them all a little snug to make sure they're tight. And then it's on. We got to get the tail shaft housing, rear output housing put back on. And same thing. From the factory, this is sealed with RTV. So I'm going around, I'm just using a green Scotch-Brite pad and a scraper to get all the old RTV off. And give it a little clean up with some brake parts cleaner. Blow it dry. Now we're ready to get this back on. So same deal as before. I'm going to rub a little finger thin layer all the way around the outside. Not finger thin, paper thin layer all the way around the outside. These are perfectly flat machined surfaces, so not big voids or anything like that you need the RTV to make up. And get it slid back into place. And I was having a little trouble getting it to slide down where it's supposed to be. I thought I had something stuck, and then that little black piece inside was moving around on me. So took a couple tries, and then I finally got it lined up sitting all the way down flush onto the back half of the case where it's supposed to be. See, again, I'm messing with that little black thing. It just didn't want to stay where it was supposed to be. I think this is it. There it goes. Right down onto its home. So then I get those 4 bolts. And just like everything else, start all of the bolts before you tighten any of the bolts. And give those a little snug. And then that's pretty much it. Stick the speedometer cable port back on the tail housing there. Shift it through all the gears once. A couple times actually. Just make sure it's going into high range. It's going into 2-wheel drive. It's going into low range. Moving through all the ranges like it's supposed to. And that transfer case is ready. Now we need to get it in the truck. The good news is I did a test fit up before I did all this, obviously, because it would have been really embarrassing if I did all this work to change the input and change the adapter, and then the adapter didn't match up right. I did a test fit, the adapter's right. So now we just got to lift it up in the truck. Now, the downside to that is I have to remove the transmission mount and cross member in order to get this bottom bolt into it. So that's a bit of a buzzkill to take that out and then put it back up again. But hey, I mean, what are you going to do? So I'm going to get it out there, get the trans supported, get the cross member off, get the mount off, and then put it all back together again with the transfer case installed. Alrighty team, well, everything went to plan. Got the transfer case mounted back up, factory location, so we will be able to use the factory drive shafts. Now there's a lot of ways to do this. You can do it and move your cross member and get your drive shafts length adjusted. There's all kinds of ways, but this is the way that Matt and I discussed, and Matt wanted to have it done on his truck. So I'm really glad it all worked out and fit up the way that we thought it was going to, and it's turning out really nice. I'm really proud of this project. I think Matt's going to be really happy with it. I think he's going to get a lot of enjoyment and use out of it, and that's the best feeling, is he'll be able to drive this around, and he already told me he wants to take his daughter places in it, and it's going to be super satisfying for him to be able to do that with his family and go out and really enjoy this truck. All right team, well that's it for this video. I'm really pumped. That's a huge milestone to have the whole drivetrain back into the truck, bolted together, in position, and fitting the way that I had planned and hoped for it to fit. So I think that's it. We'll still got to do the fuel system, still got to do all the plumbing, whole bunch of things. So there's still a lot of work to do on this project, but we're moving along the same way you eat an elephant, guys, one bite at a time. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and until the next video, everybody, take care.